feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled Movie Review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is Tomato Meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, you're looking a little red in the background there.
I decided to do the red lights in honor of my boy Carnage. Also, I apologize for this, whatever this angle is and how I'm going to be like kind of leaning over to my side. If you're watching the YouTube version, which you all should go subscribe to over on Untitled_movies, Untitled Movie Podcast, Untitled Movie Reviews. You can find us on YouTube. If you want to see this terrible camera angle. So I apologize, everyone. I'm moving in a couple weeks and I'm selling things. I usually use my iPhone as my camera, but I got a new iPhone, so I'm trying to figure everything out. So I'm using my iPad right now as my camera. So I got a little bit of a weird angle, but I did go with the Carnage red lights, Eric. I'm also drinking a Coke Zero, which is in a red can, and special treat, a Blood Light for Cletus Cassidy. He eats a little Venom blood and he becomes Carnage. So,
and on top of that, you have blood in your body.
Today we are reviewing Andy Serkis's Venom, Let There Be Carnage, starring Tom Hardy, Michelle Williams, Naomie Harris, Reid Scott, Stephen Graham, Woody Harrelson, and more. It is now playing in cinemas because Eric and I actually saw it at a public showing. We went with everyone else on a Thursday night at 5 p.m. at Landmark Cinemas in Whitby. Sat in those very comfortable seats and saw it on a large screen. Eric, how are you?
I'm good, Matt.
You got some lights. You look very well lit.
Yes. So, you have some red lighting in the background to celebrate your Lord and Savior
Titular
Carnage.
Carnage, yeah.
And I have some new lights that we're testing out. I'm still using my laptop, which is about 11 years old now. So I might in the near future
due for an upgrade.
Yeah, upgrade the laptop, but also maybe use my phone, because on these this is fun for people that are listening and wanting us to get to the review.
Audio listeners. Yeah.
Yeah. So I might use my phone because it also has a tripod built into the ring light, so I can put my phone on there. And you sent me an app that
which is what I've been using. Yeah. No, I suggest anyone who wants to make video content and usually built-in webcams are terrible. So it's called Epoch Cam Pro. It's pretty dope. But we're not reviewing webcam apps, Eric. Today we are reviewing Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage.
Do we have to?
We do. I guess we don't have to, but
the funny thing is, you already mentioned that we watched this at Landmark Cinemas in Whitby, which was a far cry from our previous experience of watching Venom in New York at the Draft House in Brooklyn, wasn't it?
Yep, we went to the Brooklyn Alamo Draft House. Yeah, the only two movies I've seen there are Spider-Man movies, because I saw the first Venom and then I saw Into the Spider-Verse with Nevis when I went as well. So we did not travel to New York. Would we have if there wasn't a pandemic still to see this movie? Maybe we would have taken that 12-hour bus. Remember how terrible that was? We tell that story
all the time,
every few months.
It ends with great pop.
Is it more enjoyable than this movie? We'll see. Eric, what is Venom, Let There Be Carnage?
All right, so essentially for the sequel, you have both Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote, both played and voiced by Tom Hardy, trying to live together in their cheap apartment and figure out what they're doing together, whether they're going to go on this course of becoming, anti-heroes. Venom keeps on pitching the idea of being the lethal protector, where...
Very 80s, Eric.
Yes. Where Eddie Brock is trying to get on a more straight and narrow path, try to get his reporting gig back. And the one kind of connection he has, if you saw the post-credit scene in Venom, is that he interviewed notorious serial killer Cletus Cassidy, played by Woody Harrelson in a ridiculous wig in the the last movie and in this movie as well. He has some choice hair cuts.
It's more of a haircut than a wig this time, though, right?
Yes, but I mean, Woody Harrelson is a bald gentleman, so it is still
Oh, it's still a
technically
hairpiece, yeah.
a
Or something,
hairpiece.
yeah.
Yes, and you know, as we're reviewing this, I think that what it'll come down to, Matt, choices were made, and as the story progresses, we see this kind of relationship, you know, quote unquote, form between the two. Cletus at one point, you know, says, if you do something for me and put this headline in the paper, I'll give you my life story. And Venom is able to
Sorry,
deduct.
no, Eric, it's I'll give you my life story.
Right. Sorry, I'm missing the nuances and poetry of Venom. Let there be carnage in the plot synopsis. Anywho, so with that, Venom is able to deduct that he knows where the bodies are. He kind of creates a rift between Eddie and Cletus to the point where Cletus is put back on death row, which is reinstated by the governor. He is sentenced to death. In his last visit, Eddie gets too close and too personal with Cletus, and Cletus bites him, tasting the Venom symbiote, which then, unexplainably, really, they don't really kind of get into why the symbiote...
Do they get into anything in this movie?
No, but this, you think that this would be something that they would give some sort of exposition
this movie,
to mutate
there's no
him into the
exposition.
Carnage
It just
symbiote.
Things happen.
I'm not calling him the symbiote. I don't care. You know, I mean, the one thing I keep thinking of that would be a good joke is to see if, like, you know, Hall and Symbiote, what they would be like as a band. But essentially, you're getting a condensed version of the first movie, with the exception of everybody and Tom Hardy this time around seem to be in on the joke or the tone of which this movie is trying to create, which is a super goofy, over the top, ultra violent, even though it's PG-13 and should be R-rated adaptation. And it's a movie that is kind of trying to kind of basically crawl or slide or slither its way between the Frank Miller written RoboCop movies 2 and 3 or a little bit of Frank Henenlotter, who is the director of the Basket Case movies and Brain Damage specifically, which is a very similar premise. I'm all for a goofy, over-the-top genre movie, whether it be a superhero film or a horror movie. We talked on the regular show recently about how much we liked James Wan's Malignant, which really does take the piss out of the genre. I'm all up for, you know, the same thing with the superhero genre. I just don't think that this movie as a whole really is able to completely decide what it wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this strange, uncomfortable mess of a blending of these two sort of bodies that just should not coalesce at all. And you're just sitting there thinking, okay, at least it's not 2 hours.
Yeah, and I think that's why ultimately I think a lot of people, us included, might go, okay, is this better than the first movie? Well,
Sure.
It's shorter. Well, you know, Carnage and Venom, while being very similar, much like God, not Shriek. I keep having Shriek. Riot in the first movie was the villain's name, right?
Yeah, played by Riz Ahmed.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The
When
other symbiote.
Yes,
yeah. Yes. I would say I like Riz Ahmed, even though he's kind of like a boring, evil, you know, Elon Musk or whatever. That
I disagree there. I think Riz Ahmed, as much as I love Riz Ahmed,
I just like Riz Ahmed. Yeah,
he's wasted in that movie and so
totally.
forgettable.
But
where
I would
at
say
least Woody Harrelson is memorable looking,
I guess,
and he kind of has like a steampunk kind of like punk rock kind of guy. But I mean, again, like we also watched Cop Shop, and we kept, you know, saying to ourselves after the film was done that, you know, Toby Huss is having so much fun as a psychopath.
Anthony Lamb spinoff, justice for
where like Carnage is a big deal within the Spider-Man universe. He is the character.
I just felt like he was so boring in this. Like,
he's underutilized, and it shouldn't be that, because again, Carnage is that character who's introduced.
He's supposed to be unhinged, where he just
the Todd McFarlane stuff, right? Like he's supposed to be violent and nasty and sort of,
he's
again,
a serial
keeps you
killer,
on your toes.
And Woody Harrelson just does this very kind of generic sociopath kind of thing. So, anyways, what I was saying is, like, I guess the villain is a little bit of a step up and the action is a little bit of a step up because, you know, that last fight scene in Riot in that first movie is literally just black goo against black goo. And then you see like a Riz Ahmed head pop out or a Tom Hardy head pop out. And it's like just this mishmash of just like nonsense, where at least with Carnage being red and Venom being black, you can kind of tell what's happening. Um, Other than that, yeah, I kind of agree with you that like the positives of the movie being like, I like the dynamic between Eddie and Venom, and they do double down on that. So like, it's not necessarily that I like this portrayal of Venom or I like Tom Hardy's performance, but like I could get behind, you know, this almost, people keep calling it a rom-com, this like of these two, you know, this alien attached to this guy and them hanging out and arguing and, you know, their friendship together and, you know, wanting to be a hero or trying to keep this thing in check when it wants to eat people's brains. Like there's some interesting stuff there. And I do like the back and forth, and I at least agree that everyone doubles down and is actually feels like they're in the same movie this time around, where in that first film I felt like Tom Hardy was in a completely different film than a lot of the people were making in that in Venom 1. And I feel like here he convinced everyone, hey, this is what the tone of this movie is going to be. Can you guys all at least try to match that? I don't think anyone necessarily does, but at least it feels like cohesive in the sense of like, oh, they were actually going for this time, where the first one, it felt like, you know, Ruben Fleischer and, you know, Tom Hardy had a vision for what Venom was, and then they kind of just got this amalgamation of stuff. I think Michelle Williams is totally wasted. I don't even know why she's in this movie. Like, there's literally no point other than her being contractually obligated. Like, she literally, it's not, no offense to her, but adds nothing of value to the movie. Naomie Harris is giving a very batshit weird kind of performance as Shriek. You're either going to be in on that or you're not. And then I think it ultimately comes down to one, how did you feel about that first movie? I feel like you're probably going to feel pretty similar about this one. If you really liked the first movie, you'll probably like this one even more. If you really didn't like the first movie, you might go, okay, that wasn't as bad, or you'll go, I still don't really like this. And that's kind of the boat that I'm in, where my biggest problems are that the movie at 97 minutes with credits, so it's really like 85 minutes, like with credits, is like moves at such a breakneck speed, which you can go, okay, at least it kind of, you know, just, it just happens. But then that's kind of my biggest problem, is everything just happens. Like, there's not that I need necessarily character development from Carnage or, you know, things like that. But then that's like, why include Michelle Williams when you are just going this very straightforward, balls to the wall? Carnage is here. He's a serial killer. He gets there, he gets out, he wants to marry his love of his life, and then Venom needs to stop him. And like, it's just all this shit just keeps happening, and there's no explanation for anything. There's no exposition. There's no why did he become Carnage. There's no why is he doing this, why does he need to do it this way, where everything kind of just happens. Or even like Eddie and Venom, it's just like their separation feels like just a way to kind of have some sort of conflict in the movie. And it just, I don't know. It just was shit on a screen for me, and then like finished, and then there's a post credit sequence that will get people talking, and I feel like that's all people will really remember from this movie.
And it's
Like,
the same thing with the first one, because what a lot of people remember from the first one is the post-credit scene with Woody Harrelson with the really bad wig as, you know, Carnage, which was setting that up. Which at that time, like, it's interesting just looking at that, because Ruben Fleischer directed the first one, and he had already worked with Woody Harrelson on Zombieland. So at that point, it was probably just like, okay, we can get this name actor to come in, and, you know, if the movie's successful, will hint at a possible sequel with him playing this kind of iconic character within the MCU, and specifically in the Spider-Man universe as a whole. But then when you're watching this, you're thinking to yourself, you know, Andy Serkis as a filmmaker, with the exception of Mowgli, I haven't really seen much from him, so I can't really judge completely like what his style is. And I don't want to necessarily just say, you know, the studio hired him because of, you know, they're working with a lot of post-production effects and possibly motion capture for Tom Hardy's performance as Venom. But thinking to yourself, it's like, okay, well, you have Woody Harrelson, and you have him paired up with Naomie Harris, who, you know, on Woody Harrelson is a 3-time Academy Award nominee. Naomie Harris, an Oscar nominee for Moonlight. Naomie Harris was also in No Time to Die, which we also talked about on this show. You can go and listen to that review. She's kind of underutilized as Moneypenny in that movie too, if that's one of my main criticisms for that character. But you look at those two characters and you think like, okay, there is maybe a little bit of self-aware sort of at least or meta to doing this because of Natural Born Killers and having Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis's characters in that movie, the Oliver Stone film. But it never really utilizes it to the way that you think that it could sort of play on that stuff. And then at the beginning, when you see them as kids, when they're first introduced in this insane asylum, you have them played by younger actors with their
Oh,
voices
yeah.
dubbed, which is weirdly more Bond than
Yeah.
the latest Bond movie in some ways, in terms of the old Bond movies would dub international actors with English voices, but here
And
you just
obviously
have
Midnight Sky, which we saw and we complained about that as
yeah,
well
where it
there.
sounded like someone swallowed George Clooney, this younger actor.
Now, like when Woody Harrelson's voice comes out of that guy, I'm like, what is
And it's
happening?
especially more jarring for someone like George Clooney or Woody Harrelson when you know what they look like when they're younger. You've seen them, in their early parts of their careers with, when George Clooney was in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, or, appeared on ER, or even before that in like guest spots
Yeah.
on Roseanne, and then with Woody Harrelson, with Cheers. Like you've seen what he looks like young, and the guy who's playing the younger version of him does not look like Woody Harrelson.
At
It's just
all.
his voice, and his voice is just Woody Harrelson now.
Right. They
So
didn't
it's
make him
it's
sound younger or anything.
it's so bizarre. And then to your point with the breakneck pace of it all, and you mentioned like, why is Michelle Williams in this movie? Well, the one reason I would say, character wise or story wise, is you have to have somebody that Eddie cares about, that is a target of Cletus. So that's why they're bringing her back specifically, to
Yeah.
be basically the damsel in distress. And the way that in one sequence Shriek finds out who Michelle Williams's character is in Eddie's apartment, and then the very next scene is in Michelle Williams's apartment as she's leaving and abducts her. It's just so sloppy in terms of
Mhm.
how it's constructed narratively, that you're looking at it, it's like, did I miss a scene? I didn't go to the bathroom. Like,
And
where
that's what I
is
mean
that
by
part
like
of
it
the
moves
movie?
so quickly where it just jumps from sequence to sequence and you're like, how did we get here? Can I have a second to breathe to understand what people's motivations are? Like why, which there are really no motivations other than Cletus is mad because he's getting sent to death row again by thing, but he wanted to be friends with him. And then you mentioned like we don't even know why Carnage gets created. So is it like if anyone swallows the venom goo mixed with blood, like it becomes a separate symbiote and like and in someone, but like it actually morphs from his body rather than just being something that's like on top of him. And like it's just not that I necessarily need a ton of explanation, like it doesn't really matter, but I can't just be sitting there not understanding what the hell is happening and just, oh, he's a bad guy. That's essentially kind of what you need to know.
Yeah,
Is
he's a
like,
generic serial killer. And
yeah,
it's the same thing with like Shriek, where like I'm wondering the whole time why, you know, her vendetta is towards Stephen Graham's kind of, police
police
officer,
officer,
where
yeah.
I think the real villain for her should have been this psychiatrist who's
Yeah.
very sadistic, and the way that they handle that is very unceremonious, and it just kind of seems again like,
Also dubbed.
yeah, it's very weird. And then like there are some really good, like also I should mention as well, Naomi Harris and Andy Serkis worked together on the Ian Dury biopic. But you have some really good people not only in front of the camera, but you have
Robert
someone like Robert
Richardson.
Richardson, who has shot movies for Martin
I
Scorsese and
laughed
Quentin
when
Tarantino.
his
And speaking of Natural
uh,
Born Killers, he was the cinematographer on that.
yeah. When his name popped up, because I forgot. So when the credits came on, I'm like, oh my God, what? I'm like, I totally forgot that he shot this movie because there's nothing particularly nice looking in this movie.
Well,
Like,
I mean, with Robert Richardson, his kind of big sort of signature in movies is that he'll usually have a light, natural light, or maybe light that's kind of harnessed, that is kind of hitting something, and it's making it look a lot brighter or harder. So like you'll usually see something like a light kind of hitting like maybe a book or something like that, and then the reflection of it coming
you
back
get bounce light, yeah.
yes, and that's
Is
kind of
that
his
in this?
signature.
Is that
I
in this? I
Not
didn't
that I
really
could
notice.
really recall, because it's all very kind of muted looking, and sort of just kind of at times it almost looks like there's something wrong with the projection, but it's just the movie. But again,
Yeah.
that Natural Born Killer thing, where it's like that, you Natural Born Killers is not a great movie in my opinion, but it is gonzo in terms of its filmmaking. And if you read or watch any of the behind the scenes features of that film, it is
Yeah.
incredibly,
Yeah.
like you can tell, like that's where Oliver Stone and Robert Richardson had their falling out. And there's a scene where they always talk about like Robert Richardson nearly lost his eye, because there's a scene where Tommy Lee Jones's Warden character has to push open this door, this cell door, and Oliver Stone told him to push it right into the camera without Robert Richardson knowing,
And it hit
and
his eye.
it just almost just popped his eye right out. And at that point, Richardson was like, I think our relationship is done
Maybe
after
that's what
this.
Shriek's story was based on. I don't know.
Maybe, but we don't want to make anybody that has lost an
No.
eye or has, any
Of course
disability.
not.
But this movie doesn't care about that either. Like
No,
it's
it
just,
doesn't. And it's just used as a plot device, and you never get a backstory from her either. Not necessarily saying that we needed that, but I didn't think that this universe was established that there were other superpowered people in it. Like, um, that's not really set up in the first movie. Like, it seemed like it was just, these aliens, and this was like a wild thing that was happening. So you don't even get anything there either. There's a weird rave sequence. So Venom splits off from Eddie. And then I felt like none of that was even explained, where I'm like, I thought they established in the first one that the symbiotes can attach to anyone and they'll be fine. So in this one, like, he's struggling to find a host that is suitable, where in the first one, I'm like, didn't they attach to like a dog and a young girl and like
but
so
I
I'm
think
like, I
he's
feel
probably
like it's
using them for longer periods of time. Like he's almost like he
in
is
this.
killing yeah, where he's like draining the person of their
See, where I
battery
only take
life,
it as a
quote unquote.
couple, it's like a night, isn't it? Or like one night? Like,
But
it
who
doesn't
knows?
seem
Because the
like.
way that this movie is edited, it could be a night, it could be a week, it could be,
I
less than
guess
an
Eddie does
hour.
have time to like clean up his apartment and like
Yeah.
get his shit together and stuff like that, but that could only be like a day or two. But like, I don't know, man. Like, that little girl in the first one that gets one of the symbiotes on her, like, travels across an obscene amount of time, I think, to like.
But they
I
do
feel like
I'm not trying to stick up for the film, but they do in the first one have those test subjects where
like
a lot
they
of
get
people aren't
fair.
compatible with
No,
them.
that's a good
So
point. Yeah. So maybe
I,
it's just.
yeah, maybe it's
I
just
don't
because
know.
Eddie's personality matches Venom perfectly, and
I'm
and
assuming
they're
that's what
more
it
quote
is.
unquote in
That's
sync.
exactly. And I get that. It's just, those are like the little things where I don't need to be spoon fed, but I feel like, not that I wanted more, as in a longer runtime, but I feel like the pacing just felt completely off to me. And like you said, it just feels like almost incoherent at times, of like what the time jumps are, where it cuts to, how sequences are put together. And yeah, I think the action maybe is like slightly better than the first movie. Like the Carnage breakout sequence and like a couple different moments are kind of like, they're violent and brutal, like you mentioned, but I almost feel like it should have had this an R rating in both films, of just to kind of maybe differentiate it from like the other Spider-Man stuff. But I don't know, man. Like, I just feel like you'll pretty much know how you're going to feel about this movie going into it. Like,
You'll either like it or you won't, and I don't think there will be really much of a
and I
sort
think you
of
kind of know that based on the first film,
yeah.
honestly.
And I think, I mean, you mentioned this as well, and I think it's worth sort of bringing up. This movie kind of feels like it belongs in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, where it's like
Yeah. first one felt like that too, though.
Yeah, like it's in that kind of category of like movies like The Mask and The Shadow and Spawn and Steel, and then when you get into the early 2000s, like there are some good ones. I keep mentioning, you know, the Wesley Snipes Blade movie where they're their own thing. And kind of are playing with like this is a movie that would weirdly work if you live in Canada, and specifically in Ontario, would play on like Teletoon or something like that at like, you know, 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday or something like that. It would be like one of those weird movies. Like it almost does feel like the MTV version of one of these superhero movies that would come out in, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s, or, you know, just again would be taking a property and kind of thinking like, oh, maybe we can make this thing work. And it's more sort of geared towards the executives, where here Tom Hardy does seem to have a little bit more control. He has a story credit with writer Kelly Marcel, so you can definitely tell that he does like the character, he is passionate about it, and
Oh
there
yeah,
is.
he definitely cares the most, which is why I think they doubled down on what he did in the first movie.
Yeah, and there is this weird kind of performance artist kind of quality going on with the scenes in, you know, his crappy apartment, where it does feel like, okay, maybe this is the stuff that was most interesting to him, and sort of challenging himself and acting basically opposite either a tennis ball or nothing, and just having those kind of conversations. And I guess if I am being, you know, giving it some credit, I don't think the CGI is necessarily bad. Like it does
I
look,
like how Venom looks. I'm
yeah,
gonna,
like it
yeah.
does have this kind of texture that doesn't necessarily look like it's going to date in this, like in a couple of years. Like it does look like what you would expect the symbiote to look like,
Yeah,
especially when he's not in the full form. I like
I
him the most when
agree.
he's like hanging on.
Like a little head that kind of
Yeah.
pops around, and yeah, like I like the back and forth between Eddie and Venom. I just think when you add in a lot of the plotting and you have to kind of fill in a superhero movie and have that kind of generic third act CG fest and things like that, where like there is potential here. And I think even in the first movie, I remember rewatching it and going like, you know what, I don't mind some of this. Like I don't mind the Venom's voice, I don't mind the back and forth between Venom and Eddie. I almost don't even mind Tom Hardy's batshit kind of like take on Eddie Brock. It's just when you kind of try to make a full movie out of that, it just hasn't worked for me in both of these. And I do like the look of Venom too. I will agree that like the CG and Carnage looks fine as well, but I do miss the big white spider on the front, which I know doesn't really make sense because I think he gets that from, you know, Spider-Man's costume, when the black suit Spider-Man kind of, he puts the white spider on the suit, and
Yeah,
that's why kind of Venom gets
even
it.
in the
But
90s cartoon, he had those square blocks on
to shoot
his
the,
arms. Yeah.
which wasn't webbing, but he was shooting the symbiote, or did he
Yeah.
shoot wedding?
I,
A webbing, I
he
forget.
shot a wedding.
But yeah,
He's a photographer on the
yeah,
side, Venom. That's how he makes his money. But yeah, again, like I really kind of like maybe the more warped Odd Couple kind of thing. But if you're looking for that kind of movie, watch Brain Damage, where it's literally this guy and an alien parasite that attaches to the back of its neck and feeds him like these kind of drug and addictive alien juices that's gross and weird, and of the early 80s New York. um this just kind of to me feels like you need, it's almost like you need a genre filmmaker to come in
yeah.
and really
I
kind of play
totally
with
agree with
this.
that. You're trying to play with horror comedy a little bit, and I just feel like Andy Serkis was a weird choice. Like it does seem like the guy just wanted a new pool or something. But like it does feel like a gun for hire kind of thing. And again, I'm not super familiar with what his, you know, why you bring him in, other than it's a lot of CG. But I agree with you that some sort of genre filmmaker could have maybe, like a Lee Wanell, right? Like with Upgrade or something like that, which is already kind of a better version of Venom.
Yeah, and I don't
Um,
want to just keep saying like James Gunn, but James Gunn, like that kind of, like somebody who has like a
that kind of
B movie
background, though,
background
yeah.
and knows sort of to have fun with kind of the splatter elements of it all, because I feel like they could, and they need to make this movie R-rated. They need to make Venom an R-rated franchise the way that they did Deadpool. And it's funny just mentioning that, because I have a question for you: is what character do you find more obnoxious, Deadpool or Venom?
Um, I enjoy the Deadpool movies more, but think Deadpool is more annoying, if that makes sense.
I get what you're saying.
Um,
Where I don't like the Deadpool movies, but I still find Venom weirdly a little bit more tolerable. Even though I don't like the Venom movies either, I find that, like, again, I think that there is potential if it's the right filmmaker that maybe can really kind of match what Hardy's bringing, and a story that, we talk about, you know when it comes to writing, that, exposition and voiceovers and things like that are can be extraneous, but sometimes they do work. And I think in something like this, you need a little bit more to really kind of flesh things out, and feast upon the brains of this character a little bit. And I just
mhm.
kind of felt like it really was just a slapdash production overall, and you're just sitting there watching it the whole time thinking like, okay, I'm waiting for this mid credit sequence to kind of blow me away, because that's what everybody's talking about. And with that, it's like, okay, well, that they are being very smart, Sony, with the marketing of that, because like the first one, that's what everybody is going to remember about this movie. They're not going to remember Carnage. They're not going to remember any of the details that went on about this. They're just going to remember, okay, what this is potentially suggesting moving forward. And that's enough to hook people and get people interested, because it is associated with Marvel.
Yeah. No, I agree. I do want to talk about the post-credit sequence, and I think maybe let's do that in a conversation quickly, like a very short one after this.
I'm
So,
down. I'm down, because I
um,
think it adds a question
yeah.
to Sony in general and
So
Marvel's
yeah.
relationship.
Let's we're going to talk about the post-credit sequence in an untitled movie conversation, which we will post on YouTube, as well as the Conversations podcast channel on podcast services everywhere. But we'll wrap up this review. I think it's, if you like the first movie, you're probably going to enjoy this. If you didn't like the first movie, you're probably not going to enjoy this. I don't think it's going to change your mind. It did not change my mind. Do I think it's a better movie? Probably, but then I almost disliked it more because it just doubled down on it and was frustrating. So like I'm gonna give the movie a 2 out of 5, which I think is lower than what I gave the first movie, but I think it's because I'm like, well, it didn't change my mind, and I do think that the pacing was way off. The 97 minutes just doesn't work because everything just feels unearned and too quick. So 2 out of 5 from me.
I'm also going to give it a 2 out of 5, even though I do think that this is better than the first one, which I gave 1 out of 5
Oh
for
wow, okay, yeah.
the first Venom. I really did not care for the movie. This is just,
I
as
think
to
I
your
gave the
point,
first one a 2.5. So I mean they're the
right?
same.
Yeah, this I'm giving it to, just again because it is shorter, but that doesn't necessarily make for a merciful experience watching this movie. But I think the two comes mostly from just I like the look of Venom.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I'm all about,
I
again,
love the
a
character. It was one of
goofy,
my favorite characters as a
because
kid.
we grew up in the 90s, in the late 90s specifically, and that's when Venom was a big deal, right? That's when Todd McFarlane introduced him, and when McFarlane was writing, you know Spider-Man. Like, the thing that everybody remembers with Todd McFarlane, writing for Spider-Man specifically, is when he stabs Juggernaut in the eye with a sword, right? And that was like, oh, cool, Marvel's now extreme and dark, and Venom was like the antithesis of
He
all
was
of
just
that.
cool looking too, and
Yeah.
Spider-Man was my favorite superhero, so it was like dark Spider-Man. It was so dope. So like just
And
to
he had
see
big
it
teeth and a
like
tongue,
and I
and
just it's hard to pull off these like villain anti-hero. I know Venom can be an anti-hero, but he started off as a Spider-Man villain. So it's still like a
he started
bummer.
off as Topher Grace.
Like it's a
Toser.
bummer for me to have the character used right away as this way. Like I like the Flash Thompson Venom that is more of an anti-hero, and I know the Eddie Brock Venom is an anti-hero at times too, but like I think starting off as a Spider-Man villain, because like anyways, it's disappointing. 2 out of 5, 2 out of 5. So we'll see what happens with Venom 3. I'm sure we're getting it. It did $11 million on Thursday night, so we'll see.
If this makes more money than Shang-Chi, I'll be really sad.
I don't think it will. It did on Thursday. Like it beat Shang-Chi's numbers, but then it Black Widow still had better numbers on Thursday, but the drop off on Black Widow was more than Shang-Chi because Shang-Chi was only theatrical. So we'll have to see. But it's a weird time. You know, if you listen to this, you probably either already watched the movie and already know how you feel. So um at least we got it over with. Stay tuned. I am excited to talk about this post-credit sequence, and I think Conversations is the right spot for a little mini spoiler cast kind of thing. So check for that on YouTube, check for it on podcast services. We also have another show entitled Movie Podcast that you guys can check out on both of those places as well. Tons of other reviews. All of our TIFF coverage is up on the reviews channel. And a one-stop shop for everything. Just head over to Letterboxd and go to Untitled_movies. You'll find links to everything over there. So thank you all for listening or watching. I apologize for my weird camera angle, and I'm probably in the 1/3 of the screen the whole time. But as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet and around, and follow me on all the social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
You were also on Kind of Funny recently as well.
I
if you wanted to
was. I
plug
did.
that.
Thank you, Eric. I popped up on Kind of Funny to do screencast Star Wars Visions episodes 4 through 6. Had a really great conversation with those guys about those episodes. I will be back for the final 3 episodes soon. We're just trying to get schedules aligned for that.
It's all about coordination. And I'm Eric Martin. You can find more of my video reviews at rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Venom, Venom, Venom.
Venom, Venom, Venom.